Okay, my friends, it is Wednesday, December 11th, and I have 5 big stories for you today, as promised earlier. Okay, so let's first look at Syria. So the Syrian rebels took Aleppo, then they went down and they took Hama and Homs, and then down to Damascus. So in taking this strip, the Syrian government lost all this territory as well. The Kurds didn't really expand. The Syrian National Army, that is backed by the Turks at the border of Turkey, they didn't really expand a whole lot. And there were some other groups that expanded a bit as well. But wow, that went very quick. 10 days. It's just amazing to watch what happened there. Now, Syrian rebels destroyed the crypt and tomb of dictator Hafez al-Assad. That's Bashar's father. You got to really hate someone to destroy their tomb. It's kind of like crime scene investigators can tell whether somebody knew the person being murdered or whether they didn't know him. Like if they were just shot once, they probably didn't know him, right? If they were stabbed 54 times, like that person knew them and really hated him. It's that sort of thing going on in Syria. Okay, just about 30 seconds from Steve Rosenberg from the BBC. So let's listen to this.
In a moment, an attempt in Russia to declare Santa Claus a foreign agent. But first, the latest reaction.
Okay, wait. Before we even talk about this, look at the picture of the wall with Assad's face bullet-ridden. They really, really hated Assad for what he did to their people.
To the fall of Assad. It's not big news in this week's Arguments and Facts. If we flick through the paper, there's a commemorative coin for the 80th anniversary of victory in World War II, free arm wrestling classes in Moscow. Syria is on page 32, where we read that Damascus's friendship with Moscow had been exaggerated.
Yeah, they're minimizing it. Isn't that fascinating to watch? Where they were bosom buddies just 2 weeks ago.
And that in Syria, the biggest loser is Iran. But a political scientist tells Nezavisima Gazeta, we need to say it straight. Russia and Iran suffered a major defeat in Syria.
Yeah, Russia really did suffer a major defeat in Syria. Let's keep going. Ukraine's intelligence service says Russia is actively retreating its key holdings in Syria. Russian Il-76 and AN-124 heavy lifters are evacuating. Multiple Russian ships are also heading toward Tartus to begin a sea lift. They're trying to get stuff out of there while they still can. Now, this is also the end of the Syrian Navy because Israel was striking the Syrian ships, 15 ships that have been located in addition to more than 350 airstrikes. By my count, it's more like 400 some odd airstrikes over the last few days, and nobody's saying boo to the Israelis. Now, the Syrian Navy is rendezvousing with the Black Sea Fleet on the seafloor. Here I see 5 ships, maybe 6. This one is underwater, if you can just kind of see what's going on there. Okay. Russia insisted on Assad's evacuation and flew him out using its airbase. So Russian intelligence agents organized the escape of Assad from the Syrian capital. The aircraft's transponder was turned off to avoid detection. A Kremlin insider told the publication that Putin demanded an explanation from Russian intelligence as to why the agencies failed to detect the threat to Assad's regime until it was too late to repel HTS offensive. You didn't see that coming, did you? Okay, Russian Z-blogger writes that Putin saved his friend Assad, but effectively abandoned his military. Now remember, Z-bloggers are very patriotic, pro-Russia. They want to see Russia succeed, but they're sometimes at odds with the official state lines because they're telling the truth more often than not, which is trapped and could now become a bargaining chip in the negotiations. Bashar al-Assad is in Moscow, and our military is stuck and blockaded in Syria, Libya, Africa. Our bases have been completely blocked. No one is allowed in or out. All transportation routes have been cut off for now. Surrounded by fighters, Russian Foreign Ministry calls it the opposition, fighters are at checkpoints. Tartus, that's the sea base in Syria, is abandoned. Ships with military personnel are in the coastal zone. There are instructors, consultants, Africa Corps, the Ministry of Defense, and Special Operations Forces at the Russian military bases. Our people are holding on bravely. Negotiations on Syria are now underway between Russia, Turkey, Iran, and others. If we leave Syria, then the point of the Defense Ministry's African Corps is destroyed. By losing Syria, including as a transportation hub, we lose access to Africa. That's right. What happened is really, really big for Russia. Now let's turn our attention to other international reaction to this. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, in his first public comment since Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was ousted, accused the United States and Israel of orchestrating the rebel uprising, like we had anything to do with it. Okay, why did Beijing throw its weight behind Assad? And what does it mean for China now that it's been toppled? This is in Radio Free Europe. And when you look into the article, China really kept kind of a little bit of a distance between Beijing and the Syrian government, and they weren't really involved in a whole lot. Chinese investment in Syria was scarce beyond a strategic partnership about the Belt and Road Initiative, where there's been some a little bit of work, but no Chinese investment in Syria, no major contracts with Chinese firms since 2010. But for Beijing, the biggest issue was the symbolism and the appearance of stability that the dictator Assad represented, because this is very complex. Now, there was the Islamic State growing in Syria, and the war led thousands of Uyghurs, those are predominantly Muslims from Western China, who traveled to Syria to fight against the Syrian government, and many of those fighters were there to learn how to use weapons, and then they would return to China, and China certainly doesn't want that. So from this perspective, Beijing supporting Assad makes some sense, but it didn't really pay off. Now, China is the least bad loser in this deal. Russia has been really hurt, and Iran has been significantly hurt. Okay, let's turn our attention to Europe. Will banning masks and fireworks end the Georgian protests, or will it make them worse? Well, they can ban it, but if people still wear it, what do they do? If they're still wearing masks, do they then crack down? Are they more violent with the people that wear a mask? How the government behaves here will determine whether this protest fizzles out or whether it becomes another Euromaidan. And then the EU top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, says that Russia has learned how to influence elections through new technologies. They really have. Now, yesterday I put out this poll. Did you know what the Russians are doing in Bulgaria before my last video? 84% of you did not know that the Russians were influencing the Bulgarians' elections as well. Now, here's the actual article from Politico. Kaja Kallas says, I see examples from Romania, but also from other parts, that the Russians have really cracked the code on how to influence elections. I think that's very fair. They have weaponized TikTok, other social media. Kallas said she's really worried. Democracy is based on trust. And if you can't trust elections anymore, then how can you trust the outcome? That's a very prescient view. But that's what Putin wants to do. He's like Loki. He's a god of mischief, and he's trying to sow this discord. Everywhere he goes, chaos follows. And if that wasn't bad enough, look at this. Russia, BRICS companies to create AI development alliance, according to TASS. Weaponizing AI is going to be the next step. Jay in Kyiv said, leave it to Russia to find the most evil uses possible for this incredible new AI technology. And that's what they're going to do. And they'd rather sow discord than work on their own economy. Putin has Russian oil giant Rosneft liquidate their foreign currency holdings to prop up the ruble, but it lasted only a few days. The genocidal Russian currency has resumed its death march, and it was up to 104 per dollar at the time that this was posted, and at the end of the day it was at 105.50. Now, I would imagine without intervention over time you'll see it start to climb again. Now, this Loki-like behavior is not a bug, it's a feature. This is the way that they roll. Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, they attack when they smell weakness. However, if met with strength, Russia avoids conflict as the risks are high and the outcomes are less certain. As a Syrian activist testified before Congress yesterday, Barack Obama's weak management of America's foreign policy towards Syria to avoid escalation provoked Russia and Iran to double down on global tea, while paving the way for 2014 annexation of Crimea that led to the full-scale 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Putin saw weakness and attacked. Obama saw strength and cowered. Threats only have value if they are credible, and Putin saw that Obama's red lines were empty words. Thus, it isn't surprising that Russia has fearlessly assisted in overthrowing governments in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, or that the Moscow-backed Assad regime killed over 400,000 civilians, or that Russia invited Hamas to Moscow less than 1 week after October 7th's attacks, or that Hezbollah has stepped up its cooperation with Latin American drug cartels, or that cybercriminal organizations tied to Russia do billions of dollars of damage to the U.S. per year. By projecting weakness, we invite the perceived vacuum of power to be filled by the strong. By no metric is Russia stronger than the U.S., but if American leadership fears using its strength, then it's no different than being weak. I think that's very fair. I think we set ourselves up for exactly what we're experiencing right now. And you've got to remember that Russian culture has not changed. I'm an American. I live in the American South. We have alligators. Alligators, you don't try to pet them because even if you had the nicest alligator, they're still an alligator. They're never going to be a cute little puppy dog. So you don't treat them like they're a puppy dog when they're really an alligator. Okay, let's turn our attention to the fourth big story. This is about American politics. Wrong. Russian assets have not been seized. Now, I said this wrong the other day, and I want to correct the record. Wrong. Russian assets have not been seized. This is part of a G7 loan collateralized by interest earned on Russia's assets, which still belong to Russia. The total loan is $50 billion. Seizing the assets would yield over $300 billion, a game changer. Yet G7 won't do this, mainly due to French and German resistance. And I was saying, like, look, it's not a good idea to seize the assets. I still stand by that. It's not a good idea to seize the assets. However, using the loan on the interest of the assets, that's a little bit more palatable. The outright seizure of the assets could dangerously disrupt the financial system. But okay, so I got it wrong, and I want to make clear that that's what happened, not what I was alluding to. Now, Zelenskyy and Biden's relationship has gotten a little weird lately. Zelenskyy refused to lower the mobilization age, and that has seriously strained his relationship with Biden, reports The Telegraph. There have been many disagreements between the two leaders, but the dispute began last week. It may be the final one. Quote, when a State Department representative stated that the U.S. was ready to arm and train new brigades, this was too much for Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The Ukrainian president felt compelled to respond publicly about this. And there's only 42 days left in the Biden administration. Now, Zelenskyy doesn't want to totally tick him off. He's not trying to do that, but there's another $5 billion on the table that could be very useful. Now, I think that Biden might see Zelensky's unwillingness to lower the mobilization age as an excuse for why things didn't go the way that they should have gone, and you'll probably hear that in his memoirs somewhere down the line. Now, there's an interesting plot twist. Ukraine now trusts Trump 44.6%, more than any European nation, even Hungary. What? Ukraine trusts Trump more than any other European nation? Yeah. Meanwhile, Biden's approval among Ukrainians has dropped from 81.8% to 55.2%. And the reason is that Ukrainians see the language of as long as it takes. It just doesn't work. And here's the actual article in Euromaidan Press. Donald Trump was found to be the 10th most trusted foreign leader in Ukraine, enjoying a trust rating of 44.6%, a recent poll found. This makes Ukraine the most Trump-positive nation in Europe. What just happened? Now, I've always said, Trump is a wild card. He could work out badly. He could work out well. But Ukraine is the most Trump-positive nation in Europe? That's amazing to me. Meanwhile, a Republican senator tells Jewish Insider that members of the Senate Intelligence Committee told colleagues that they were not impressed with Tulsi Gabbard's performance during their interviews over the past week. Quote, one told me she was the worst prepared candidate. Well, right now I'm looking at Polymarket, and as of today, her chance of being confirmed by the Senate has gone up. It's at 69%. It's a long way to go before January 20th, but wow, I didn't see that. She was at 50-something percent just the other day. Now, I'm with George Bush, the George W. Bush Presidential Center, simple and common sense policy recommendations. 1. Increase military assistance to Ukraine. 2. Impose more effective sanctions on Russia. 3. Accept Ukraine into NATO. 4. Prosecute Russian war crimes. It's pretty simple. This is big story number 5, and it's a game changer when they get it to work effectively. It's kind of like solar panels, and I'll explain what I mean in a moment. A high-energy laser weapon has been fired by the British Army from an armored vehicle for the first time, successfully destroyed flying drones, UK Defense Minister reported. Dear UK, you know a good place to try out and test this weapon thoroughly, don't you? Now, laser weapons are virtually limitless in terms of ammunition supply, which means that they could represent a cost-effective alternative to some current in-service weapons. The laser was integrated onto a Wolfhound, so it was on this truck, and they shot that thing and knocked down a drone. Now, I said it's like solar panels. Solar panels work, but they're kind of cost prohibitive. And if either the cost or the ability to function, the amount of energy it can produce, if the energy it produces goes up or the cost drops, they'll become a clear alternative. It's kind of like that. They've had these lasers, but they haven't really done a lot like this today to actually experiment and show that they could knock these things down. Now, when this spreads, drones as we know it will cease to be the menace that it is today. It'll still be a problem, but it won't be the same problem. And then instead of targeting drones, we're going to have to target the laser systems that are knocking down the drones. It's like rockets being a problem and then air defense artillery being the solution. But then you have to deal with the air defense artillery in order to deal with the problem for the rockets, and so on and so forth. It'll just keep going. But this was a big, big day in the future and the evolution of warfare. Now I'm going to leave you with one more thing, and that's introducing you to two of my heroes. Look at these guys. Two little Lviv residents asked for FPV drones for the military, and with their parents, they handed them over to the front. And does anyone feel sorry for Ukraine by sacrificing aid for the price of a cup of coffee per month? And these guys are sacrificing these FPV drones. I mean, part of me just wants to buy them FPV drones for Christmas at this point. Like, that is awesome. All right, let me leave you with that. Thank you, my friends, for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.